It's crazy to think that at one point in college football history, Kansas State was arguably the worst Power 5 program. They went from futility U to now one of the most consistent programs in college football. While K-State is not winning national titles or making college football playoff appearances, they're pretty much a lock to go to a bowl game every year. They've played the same consistent style of football for years, and they're always going to be well coached and disciplined. The same can be said for the quarterback position for them. They've had some really good players such as Josh Freeman, Colin Klein, and most recently Skylar Thompson, but the subject of today's video could be just as good as them and could go down as one of the best Kansas State quarterbacks ever. So far in his brief time with K-State, he's had some moments where he's showcased unlimited potential and has also shown some times of youth. Overall though, he's going to be the starter in 2023, and I think he has the potential to be the next great Kansas State quarterback, could see himself in the NFL, and could win a lot of games for the Wildcats. We're obviously going to be talking about quarterback Will Howard, and in today's video, I want to go through who this guy is, how he got to this point, how his K-State career has gone so far, and why I'm so high on him for the future. But before we get started, quickly be sure to leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new to the channel and love college football, let me know a player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next, and don't forget to turn on post notifications so you never miss when I upload. Now, let's get started and talk about Will Howard. So in order to understand how Will Howard has got to this point, we first need to go back in time. He grew up in the state of Pennsylvania, and Will loved football from a young age, and more specifically was a die-hard Philadelphia Eagles fan. He apparently started playing flag football at 6 years old, and eventually settled on the quarterback position. He'd go to Downington West High School, and apparently would become the starting quarterback as a sophomore, and then saw a ton of success the first half of his junior year before he got hurt and would have to miss some time. As a senior, Howard would have an insane season as he threw for 2,543 yards and 27 touchdowns. He also led them to their first championship in school history and had a school record 13 wins for them. To go alongside that, he was also a star basketball player and would eclipse nearly 1,000 points in his career, and this would only help him be better on the football field. He eventually would start to get a ton of offers, but he'd have to go through an interesting predicament. He said, quote, "A big part of it for me was the Power 5 versus the Ivy. I had some of the best schools in the country and some of the best football schools in the country, and I was like, what do I want more?" Well, Will would end up going the Power 5 route, as he said, quote, "It just came down to growing up. I always watched the big games, and I wanted to be in that big atmosphere. It was sort of my dream." Howard liked a lot of the schools that were pursuing him. He'd have to actually do the dirty work to get his favorite school to talk to him. He said, quote, "I got in contact with Kansas State offensive line coach Connor Riley. He had followed me on Twitter, and I sent him a direct message of my film, and he ended up responding, and 2 days later, I got an offer. You might be intrigued by this situation," and Howard offered an explanation for this. He said, quote, "I reached out to Riley because they don't really look at kids from where I'm from. They don't have an area recruiter for us, and I knew they were kind of looking for quarterbacks and all that. That's part of the recruiting process, and you just have to be proactive, so I sent my film out there." Kansas State, Kansas, and Maryland seemed to be the early favorites for Will, but he took a ton of visits and trips trying to soak the experience up and take advantage of opportunities other people would only dream of. But quarterback recruiting goes quick, and some factors are out of your control. It seemed that the brother of another big-time Big 12 quarterback would have an impact on where Howard would go, and that was Chuba Purdy. When Howard ended up making his decision, he picked Kansas State, and this happened right after Purdy chose Louisville. He became well aware that opportunities for quarterbacks would start to disappear, and a lot of the schools he was talking to were waiting to hear where Purdy would go. Chuba would since go to Florida State and is now at Nebraska. Will Howard ended up having other Power 5 offers, including Maryland, Rutgers, Kansas, and Minnesota, and while KU canceled his visit, there was a lot of buzz at one point suggesting that the Terrapins were in the lead for his recruitment. The thought was, just before Howard took his official visit to K-State, that he actually silently committed to head coach Mike Locksley and the Terrapins. But nope, that did not end up happening, as Manhattan would be his new home, and Coach Kleiman and Colin Klein got the job done for the Wildcats. Why Kansas State? He said, quote, "Honestly, it was the people that made the difference. The coaches, the fans, the players, and everyone in the town of Manhattan were so genuine and nice. I really feel at home there. Other than being far away, there weren't really any things about K-State that I didn't love. I know that they will push me, but also look out for me and support me, and I'm really confident in my choice." He was a great quarterback with great grades, as he apparently had a 4.3 GPA, and on the field, he had a cannon for an arm and maturity beyond his years. That's why so many schools wanted him, but K-State won the sweepstakes, and he saw himself similar to a former #1 overall pick. As I said earlier, he was a huge Philadelphia Eagles fan, and he saw what Coach Kleiman did with Carson Wentz. He said, quote, "I feel like I'm a player that is similar type to him, and I'm really looking forward to playing in the same offensive system that he did. Obviously, it's cool to say that I'm playing for his coaches and hear old stories about him from Coach Kleiman. Despite being pursued by a lot of big schools, 24/7 Sports wasn't as high on Howard as you think. According to them, he was only a 3-star player, the number 33 pro-style quarterback, and the 888th best player in the class of 2020. So how would the Pennsylvania product end up doing in the Little Apple? Getting into his Kansas State career, Howard was expected to eventually see the field, but not right away. As a freshman, he'd actually get a chance to start the last 7 games after Skylar Thompson would suffer a season-ending injury. Because of this, he'd make history as he was the first true freshman quarterback to start since 2006, and they'd actually get the win over TCU. He said, quote, "We got the win, and that's all that matters to me. I'm happy as heck that we won the game, but there's a lot to clean up." Unfortunately, with every high, there's a low, and the Wildcats would finish the season with 5 straight losses. He did start the final 7 games of the 2020 season, throwing for 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. Wasn't great numbers, but he was pretty young, and there was obvious potential there. But his struggles really started to get to him. He said at one point, "As much as you try to block it out, you still hear it. It's still kind of in the back of my head, and that is definitely one of my motivators to prove people wrong." I feel like we've made some good strides in doing that, and I've made some good strides in doing that, and there's a lot of work to do. In 2021, Howard would end up appearing in 5 games, throwing for 332 yards with a touchdown and a pick, and he also had 4 scores on the ground. It was solid for a backup. Going into 2022, Skylar Thompson had been drafted into the NFL, but instead of riding with Howard, they decided to bring in transfer quarterback Adrian Martinez. A lot of players probably would have transferred in that scenario, but not Howard. Unfortunately for Martinez, he'd get hurt, but luckily for Will, he'd get a chance to play. Howard would end up appearing in 5 regular season games and had really good numbers. He had 2 touchdowns in their loss to TCU, and then had 296 yards and 4 touchdowns in a 48-0 shutout over Oklahoma State. The Cowboys were ranked number 9 in the country. Howard would take over for the next few games, throwing for 3 touchdowns in a win over Baylor, had 3 touchdowns in a win over West Virginia, and then 2 touchdowns in their rivalry win over Kansas. Howard had now led them to 4 straight victories and would get a chance to start in the Big 12 championship. Against number 3 TCU, he got revenge as he combined for 3 scores, and they won 31-28 in overtime. After losing those first 2 seasons backing up Thompson and Martinez, he could have easily seen the writing on the wall and transferred, but he didn't. Chris Kleiman said he never worried about Will leaving because that wasn't the type of player he was, and I think that's going to pay off for him in a big way in 2023. Unfortunately, he'd get humbled against Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, as after a quick start in that game, they got blown out 45-20, and he had 2 touchdowns without even scoring against the Crimson Tide defense. He finished the year with 1,600 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 4 picks, with 3 more scores on the ground, and he had a 60% completion percentage. Howard was winning Big 12 games, putting up big numbers, and scoring the ball, so there's no reason to think that with more confidence and with more reps, he's only going to get better next year. He's been patiently waiting his turn, and I'm putting a lot of money on Howard having a breakout season and becoming one of the top quarterbacks in the Big 12. At 6'5" with a great arm and great intelligence, Howard could also play his way onto the NFL's radar with a big season, and I'm definitely curious to see how it's going to go. K-State always develops these 3-star kids into stars, and I think Will Howard is next up. But what do you guys think? If you're a K-State fan, what are your expectations for Will Howard? What are your expectations for this upcoming season? And what player, topic, team, or situation can I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all of the videos on the end screen, including my video about the rise of Deuce Vaughn. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.